Hello everybody. We will wait a few minutes so others can join us before we start. Can everybody hear me all right? All right, it is 9 p.m. so we will be starting. Hello everybody, I am Yara Sharif and welcome to Bedtime Stories. It is really an honor to be here with you this evening, and many thanks for everybody who's here, particularly the students from the University of Westminster who are attending, and also my friends and colleagues in Palestine. So ahlan wa sahlan everybody, welcome. Also, before I start, I wanted to thank Alicia and Rosie for having me this evening. Thank you very much for the effort that you have put. So what I will be reading to you this evening, I will be reading to you from my book. It is called Architecture of Resistance. This is the book. This book is very much about my personal story as a Palestinian, as an architect, as a female that has been living under occupation and trying to shape her identity as an architect. So while living under such condition, I was always trying to think what can be done. So while the book tried to address that, it also tried to document an important era in Palestine with its spatial fragmentation, which is the contemporary Palestine that we are living in today. But the book is also a statement against the current ongoing colonial system that we are currently living in, which is kind of that form of a structured occupation that tends to erase Palestinians and render them as absent from the map while they are actually existent. And this is happening at a time which today, unfortunately, we realize that Google has removed completely the name of Palestine from the map. This kind of ongoing system of mental occupation and mental erasure is really what I've been trying to work on this book, by showing the alternative voice and the voice of the personal, the voice of the Palestinians themselves. So while I try to document this, I try in the book to show this absurd and surreal landscape that we live in Palestine with its fragmentation, but also it's a way of, it tries to show a way of life that we as Palestinians need to develop in order to survive. While some of these kind of absurd way of living may appear at times ironic or funny, but in fact they represent a status also of abnormality that one needs to be careful about. So the book is about this relationship between the personal and the political, between time and space. Everything really collide in what I call architecture of resistance. And before I start reading the book, and I will try also to show you some images from it, I wanted to give you a bit of a perspective of what does it mean to live in Palestine, or how does Palestine look like, maybe the map and its fragmentation. So I did this little exercise of trying to measure what is the size of the West Bank, and it appears like almost a journey through across the West Bank is equivalent to a journey from London to Cambridge. So imagine while you're crossing that journey from London to Cambridge, you are faced with 600 checkpoints, roadblocks, and different kinds of obstructions, causing a massive uncertainty in mobility, causing a massive uncertainty in your daily life and in the economy. You can never tell whether you will reach your destination or not. This kind of frustration and oppression that comes with these boundaries makes it impossible to make sense of where actually our spaces start or end as Palestinians. But it also is accompanied with another softer side of this occupation, which maybe makes life more bearable. With these new urban realities, each traveler tries to cultivate hope or capture a moment of hope to lift them up during these difficult times. It is about cultivating hope, and this is what I will try to share with you through my diary. So the book is a combination between diaries, between imaginary landscape that I've put, but also a documentation of this fragmentation. So I'll start from an extract from the book. A decade ago, when trying to shape my identity as a Palestinian architect, I became no longer able to live within the subtle acceptance of the norm that existed in the West Bank. So I packed my stuff and left, in search for a place where other choices could be made, where life would be bigger than the city of Ramallah, where adventures may involve more than journeys across checkpoints, and where dreams could go beyond merely those of sneaking into Jerusalem, which after all is only 15 minutes away from my home. I eventually made it, but not in the way I had intended. I discovered that I could not reach Jerusalem, nor could I cross Kalandia checkpoint. Yet, somehow, some way, I found myself in London, in a part of the world where I was told rational choices can be made. Now, having come to terms with the reality that the rest of the world is as equally contested, and that the search for justice is just as problematic in somewhere like the UK, I have realized that I have spent the past 10 years of my life actually searching for my Palestine. Between zooming in and out, I'm struck to realize that my Palestine seen from an inside lens is very different to that from the outside. From an outsider's perspective, the signs all clearly seem to be there. The separation wall, the contested map, the confusing landscape, the uncertainty of where Palestinian spaces start or end. When viewed from the inside, however, it's not that these signs are less obvious. It is just that we, Palestinians, have to live with them in every single detail of our life. This is probably the aspect that those from the outside cannot see, since it might be too small to observe, or maybe too surreal to absorb. The sense of invisibility, subversion, the in-betweenness that comes with an everyday life of surviving under occupation, time, immobility, as well as the sheer sense of chaos that this brings with it, form exactly what this book is about. Having spent 10 years of living in and out of Palestine, it has enabled me to see the spatial possibilities that lie in those little details and small spaces of everyday survival and resistance. Invisibility, silence, subversion contribute towards a new geography of resistance, where the sense of absence introduces new potentials. Every object and context, even if it's a sewage pipe, becomes a possibility to survive, or a tactic to resist. The exercise of this invisible power, which requires, as Barnes argues, ignorance from one side and knowledge from the other, becomes crucial to sustain and negotiate one's own space in Palestine. I will read an extract called The Art of Resistance, and halfway through the extract I will show you a few images. Distance and time have become irrelevant phenomena in the West Bank over the last 15 years or so. Immobility is a key tool in Israeli occupation. Waiting to cross a checkpoint, walking through no-drive zone, or spending hours finding a way out to reach work or school all have become a central feature of Palestinian life. A journey that normally takes an hour is now taking up to 4 hours, if not a whole day. Palestine has become more associated with the checkpoints enforced on its citizens and the alternative routes that one needs to look for or create in order to reach one's destination. Traveling now is more about the yellow Ford Transit vans, the two-wheel driven carriages, the street vendors along the way, and the stories that one needs to make up to the soldiers in order to be able to cross from one point to another. The orders are not to let anyone through today. The Israeli soldiers were shouting while I was dragging my suitcases and myself through the dusty checkpoint. I had to find my way out to Nablus. At the edge of the road, the drivers were shouting their destinations: Tora Bora, Wadi Nar, Mu'arrajat, Tom and Jerry. Mine, however, is the Tora Bora route. It might sound like Afghanistan, but it's actually the new route to get to the city of Nablus, with its series of rocky landscape and dramatic topography while crossing through the agricultural routes and the stone quarries along the way. The experience above reflects my everyday life in the West Bank, specifically between 2005 and 2009, when I used to travel to university and later to my work as an architect on site. Despite the difficulties and sheer despair experienced by Palestinians living under occupation, an enforced short drive or walk along some fields is in truth equally as enjoyable as it troubles the mind. The olive terraces, the smell of jasmine and lemon trees. It feels like one is running away from the madness of the occupation instead of facing it, in every path we create or every checkpoint we avoid. These new alternative routes across Palestinian rural areas have become associated with memories and narratives. Wadi Nar, or what is known as the Valley of Fire, the impossible roller coaster route where you can hardly climb up the hill, Tom and Jerry route with its cat and mouse relationship, and many others, started out as individual attempts to proceed with one's journey, but have ended up as a form of collective experience representing most Palestinians in the West Bank today. These are the non-places being made by everyday life into the very real places. In the face of such challenges, Palestinians have managed to negotiate border lines by introducing new social roles and possibilities. Whenever the need to find an alternative route has emerged, the landscape has since become jammed with Ford transit vans, or the Fords as every Palestinian refers to them, found at the edges of the main roads and even in the middle of nowhere, waiting to pick up the desperate faces who haven't managed to cross Israeli checkpoints. It was my bad, or maybe my good luck, back in 2002 to drive through the informal route of Kufr Name during a heavy rainy day, which leads to the western villages around Ramallah. The entire valley had been transformed into a big lake, with floating cars, including mine, which was drowning, until Abu Ali's tractor from Ras Karkar, the next door village, came to rescue us. The 15 shekels I paid then was not really the issue. It's the embarrassment of being pulled with a tractor, hoping I didn't encounter anybody I know. I knew I had to get out, whatever it took. especially since any minute an Israeli jeep could arrive, start shooting, and the experience of this cat and mouse chase would end absolutely. I thought then it was a one-off experience that I would not like to share. But few days later, some friends were proudly broadcasting their adventurous trip through the Kana Valley. There, they had to pay 50 shekels to get a caterpillar from the village of Deir Istia to pull their minibus up the hill. Within few weeks, the one tractor became two, and the voluntary service turned into a new business throughout the winter season, serving what was named as the Tom and Jerry route. With this ongoing system of segregation created by the Israeli occupation, a whole culture started to develop around the checkpoints and informal routes. Individual experiments in negotiating space are turning over time into a collective act. Street vendors joined the patterns of the commuters along checkpoints and no-drive zones, have also taken over the leftover spaces. Hence, a whole series of canteens selling sandwiches, fruits, drinks, coffee, and even clothes and furniture has come to fill in the urban voids. Two-wheel, donkey-driven taxis, in effect the simplest type of carts, have also appeared more recently to carry Palestinians and their luggages on secret journeys around checkpoints and in no-drive zones, where wheels are only allowed by the soldiers if not motorized. Even though they have so far been limited to specific areas in the West Bank, especially the north near Nablus, the so-called al-Bisat al-Sihri, or the magic carpet, have turned into a source of hope that can seemingly fly over any perceived obstacle. With their imaginative stories of heroic figures, the drivers have made the impossible easy to reach in the village of Burin. Signs such as "No Fear," "Aziza," "The Mercedes is at the other end," are all written nicely on the bright yellow plastic covers of the donkey carts, with colorful decorations to attract the few shy pedestrians who might otherwise rather prefer to walk. With a piece of carpet laid on the cart for sitting on and a big blue evil eye or prayer beads hanging up to bless the route, one can now not avoid such experience, giving up on the 21st century vehicles completely if one has the choice. Before I read a bit of a diary, I want to share with you some images from this experience that I've just been reading to give you a bit of feel of what it feels to live in Palestine. So excuse these. So these are just, excuse the primitive way of showing it. These are images of people trying to live under occupation where this sense of mobility or immobility become a key feature of everyday life. These are images of the drowning routes and the cars in the middle of nowhere trying to pick up the desperate faces, and these are images of people stuck in the fields and actually lifting the car themselves in order to be able to cross from one point to the other. And these are the carts, the four-wheel donkey-driven carts, and the people waiting across the checkpoints to pick up the desperate faces. And the lady in the back of this photo is my friend Dana, who is one of the audience tonight. Hi, Dana. I am going to finish the reading by a bit of a diary, and the diary is called The Invisible Hitchhiker, and it's a story. This is us, the invisible hitchhiker, myself, Sahar, and Dana, and our friend Luke, where we were trying simply to go on a journey to swim in the Dead Sea. And the diary is just simply showing this absurd landscape, but the absurd way of living that we also had to make or come up with in order to survive, but also enjoy ourselves as a mean to cultivate hope. From my own diary, June 25th, 2009. All I wanted was to go for a swim in the Dead Sea. Before I made my way back to London, the next day, Sahar, Dana, Luke joined in. All of them were exhausted from a hot summer day and could not wait to be in the water. We got into the famous yellow van on Ramallah-Jericho route, and halfway through, the van driver in the opposite directions were flashing their lights. Apparently, a flying checkpoint was blocking the entrance, just a few meters before reaching the seaside. Our driver was not interested in taking a new route, nor did he want to risk crossing the checkpoint. So we were instantly dumped in the usual numb places at the junction where the roads for the Palestinians face those for the Israelis. Hopefully, another adventurous driver would pick us up. From there, at the entrance to Jericho, our journey really started. "Put your scarf on," Dana whispered while leading the way towards the opposite side of the road. "What headscarf?" I asked. With confidence, she wrapped hers around, just like the Israeli settlers do, and headed towards the hitchhiking spot known in Hebrew as Trampiada. My heart started sinking. For the first time in my life, I was heading towards Israeli settlers instead of running away from them. "Dana, this is insane," I cried. "Don't worry, Yara. Not only this is free, no checkpoint will stop us. We can go all the way to Eilat Beach if you like." Despite my shock and fear, I sensed from Dana's confidence a lifestyle she was so accustomed to. So I defied my fear. I defied my dear friend Suad's words rumbling in my heart, "Nothing to lose but your life," and thought to myself, why not? Let's give it a try. I remained quiet, trying to think what needs to be done to pass as an Israeli settler. Other than myself, no one else seemed to care if we were ever got caught. Why should they? Sahar has a Jerusalem ID. Luke is American, and Dana is so blonde that she can hardly be recognized as a Palestinian, not with the distorted stereotypical image that settlers have about Palestinians look. The main problem is really in terms of how I look. I disguised my face as much as I could. Unsuccessfully, I tried to wrap the scarf around my head while watching the crowd pointing with their fingers to the cars. 10 minutes of waiting, and nothing still is coming through. Only the spoken Hebrew of the settler around me is echoing in my ears. It took me a while to feel anywhere near confident. Instead, I kept examining myself to make sure I looked convincing. I knew that hitchhiking is a common thing in Israel, but how on earth should I, as a Palestinian, know how it works? "Just press the button," Dana suggested after a long wait. Apparently, it is a way to alert Israeli drivers who are waiting on traffic lights that they get ready to pick up their fellow settlers on the way. "Don't worry, Yara. We'll be fast. No settler would want to be at the entrance of Jericho at this time of the day," Dana whispered with her cheeky smile. A few minutes later, and we were all squeezed at the back of the car, driving across the highway. Dana starts with her American accent. "Can we get as close as possible to the Dead Sea, please?" The car driver replied, "Dead Sea? Sure, it's on my way. I live in Mitzpeh Shalom." "Where from are you?" While Luke tried to join the conversation, Sahar and I stared at one another, realizing what we've got ourselves into. Mitzpeh Shalom is well known for its right-wing settlers who would not hesitate to do anything if they recognize our real identity. Luke's loud voice interrupted my scary thoughts. "We're from Ohio, and we're here to look around." Yeah, it was true. I really started to look around, nervously examining the car, its object, and any possible sign that might help us in case we had to run away. Of the whole car, I could only spot tiny stickers on the rear window. All I could read with my broken Hebrew was, they are handing over the Dead Sea too, and Hebron ours and forever. I happen to remember that Hebron sticker very well. Ruba, my friend, would use them in her car to pass through checkpoints with less hassle. Apparently, such cynical tricks have worked so well that Palestinian taxi drivers have also been using them inside Jerusalem for some time. With such stickers, not only do they get one through checkpoints fast, but they also increase the chances of taxi drivers picking up customers who might otherwise want to get into a Palestinian cab. The map beneath the sticker also looked very familiar. I had once worked in Hebron. For a whole year, I visited every single house and walked through its maze of alleyways. I was hosted at Maha's house for 3 days under curfew just so that Israeli settlers could walk free. Who knows? Our driver could have been one of them. At that point, I felt the poster was really there to remind me that Hebron is indeed ours, not his. Just as the Dead Sea is also ours. If it takes an Israeli settler to drive me through my own map, then let it be, why not? Why not to enjoy it if eventually I'll be able to cross all boundaries? With a few jokes here and there, we were soon about to reach our destination. A shiver ran down my spine. This one, however, was of happiness, not of fear. For some reason, I felt that I was no longer chained. Neither the driver nor the settlements around could occupy us anymore. At that moment, it was me who was occupying him. Just before we drove off, I asked where is the best spot to get to Beersheba. My friend Dana wants to visit Adamama farm. I didn't join the final leg of the trip to Beersheba, but definitely it was worth the effort. From Ramallah, Dana told me she had made it through to the village of Beit Sahur, down to Hebron, reaching her first hitchhiking point near to the Israeli settlement of Kiryat Arba. From there, she made her way to Beersheba and finally to Adamama farm. I smelled the scents of Gaza and the Mediterranean's few minutes away before I made my way back hitchhiking through Jaffa, Jerusalem, and finally Kalandia checkpoint. It was Dana's only way to explore what she has been missing in her 30 years of life. Indeed, if it weren't for Dana's sense of humor or the car stickers and that whole hitchhiking adventure, my own mental map would not have been stretched so far. The journey itself did not really matter. More important were the boundaries we broke with our hidden rules of daily coexistence. It is remarkable to observe how much car mobility has in time created a public sphere in which Palestinians negotiate their space and boundaries as well as their identity. Each Palestinian view it as a political message where the complex social and political realities can be distilled in a moment of time. The stories in this book talk about this invisible resistance, the soft resistance. They also reveal that there is a degree of irony and power that lies within Palestinians that can subvert spaces of oppression such that they are changed into spaces of play and creativity in which social life can be recovered. This hidden dynamic topography born out of these extreme conditions may help to draw lines for what could be seen as architecture of resistance. After all, if the physical space cannot be reclaimed, then the mental space surely has no boundaries. This is the end of my reading. I hope you enjoyed it and thank you very much for your time.